Hey guys, welcome to the very first ever episode of Mosaic Life podcast. This is a podcast that is not going to help you if you're looking for answers. It is simply me searching. This is my brother-in-law sitting right next to me. I'm just now on though. From now on, I'm just going to say my brother because I hate saying brother-in-law. This is my brother, and y'all are meeting him for the first time.
I'm his brother-in-law. That is now my title for all future episodes.
Just brother-in-law?
I'm just the brother-in-law.
The one thing I wanted you not to be.
I'm just going to leave it at Law. From now on, just call me Law.
That is his name, actually. And
it is. True story.
Me and Law met back in... It's not his name. Go ahead, introduce yourself, man.
I did. I'm Daniel Hennessy. I mean, what else do I need to say?
You want to put your social in there too?
Yeah, my social is no. I'm Daniel, and I'm excited to be on Mosaic. This is going to be a wild adventure. It's so funny because we're talking about before we started the recording is I like plans and I like ABC. And Sam's like, all right, we're going to do C first and then D, and then we'll go back to A.
This is why I'm smiling very, like, I was going to say loudly.
Loudly.
This is why I'm smiling really big because you are such a planner.
Yes.
And this is the most unplanned thing.
Opposite of plan.
You only know one thing going into this, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Exactly.
And it's not even like structured.
None.
You love structure.
Love structure.
I gave you the most vague way of saying exactly what we're going to talk about on this episode, and you're freaking out internally, and I love that.
Freaking out internally. I don't even know where to look. I'm just going to look at this dog on the couch.
Scanning.
The popcorn. I mean, I don't even know where to focus. Do I look at my phone? Do I look at... Okay, so I'm just going to look at you the whole time.
So it's a very fitting episode because we're going to talk about fear.
Yes.
And currently, as I'm sitting here, I am very afraid because this is, I mean, outside of awkward stutters, this is the first time that I've done an episode, or not even an episode, an actual podcast series that is solely fixated on what we're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of you guys know me from the basement. That was a sample. Like if it was a Costco little table sample of what this episode, or I keep saying episode because I think it's only one episode. It's not of what this podcast is going to be. Because while I was on the basement, my whole dynamic was I wanted answers for my life. And so I would ask questions that were things that I needed answered in my life because I was just like searching.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this, but like the first episodes of The Basement was a really rough season of my life. I was going through a divorce. And so every single episode that we would record, I felt so unworthy to be there.
Yeah.
And so I'd have to like leave. We'd pack up everything. I'd get in my car and everything inside of me is just like, you're not, why are you in that room? And so like that was the dynamic that I had to face going into it. This one's different because I'm scared.
Yeah.
And it's like everything in my head is nobody really wants this. Nobody needs this.
Yeah.
But going into this, we put out a bunch of feelers.
Yeah.
And so many people sent comments, sent messages, just saying how much they needed to hear just the short little snippets that I did.
Yeah.
And were highly encouraging. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid going into this episode. I'm afraid starting this thing. And I want to be completely transparent with our audience, with you guys. I want to be completely transparent with my co-host. Daniel is not just my brother, but on this...
Law.
My brother.
Forget the law.
And he's also going to keep me in line because I can get on some rabbit trails and I can be pretty wild. But like, I didn't want this to be an echo chamber of just me talking and then like someone agreeing with me. Like Daniel has always been someone in my life.
I will not agree with you.
You will not.
I don't even agree with that. Whatever you say.
Just right off the bat, I need you to be the devil's advocate.
I need like a keyword. Every time I disagree, dis.
Dis.
Anyway, sorry. I didn't mean
And,
it.
no, you're
All
fine.
right, keep going.
And so, but I have always come to you in life when I'm going through any kind of situation,
Yeah.
and just I've valued your perspective. I've valued the way that you look at things, because it's completely different than the way that I look at things. In fact, we've talked about this a few times where like our dynamic is so opposite
Yes.
that we
it
kind of
fits.
balance each other out.
Yes.
And so those are just like the fear thoughts that I have right now as I sit here. What are you going through?
The same times a million. So, if you're going through what you're feeling right now and you're not a planner, and the planning side of me, like every red light is going off right now saying, Daniel, what in the heck are you doing? What's interesting is that Sam came up to me, it was a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. We'll say it was within a month. You came up to me and you said, Daniel, I've had this dream in my heart. I've had this vision of Mosaic, and this is what it was. And as soon as you said it, like, I have these feelers that I have out there, and when I hear something, I immediately feel grace on some things, and some of it I'm like, I need to go through the planning channels. But as soon as you said Mosaic, I was like, there's no planning channel on this. Like, yes, when are we starting it? When are we going to do it? Let's go ABC, Then the planning came in. But I was like, this is so right, because, and I think it's when I recognize like the voice of God in somebody, I knew that God was speaking to you on this. And I was like even happier because you said it's not going to be a show about answers. In fact, we're going to have something that's probably not going to have any answers for anybody, but we're just going to pose the question. We're going to see who else is going through it, and then we're going to help each other out. And then also say stuff that's off of our journey. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is gospel right here. Like, this is, okay, the church coming together, and you have this, you've experienced this, you've gone through this. Let's see how it works in the big picture. And it's a different show because, like, some of y'all may have listened to like stuff from Palestine Church. You may have heard like Ruth's in here in the background, just setting up the cameras for us. So awesome. But Ruth and I did Marriage Mondays for a while, and it was just like a 20-minute episode. And what it was not what this is going to be. It was like a teaching real quick. Let's pick a topic. Let's go after something. And it was really one-sided on that. And I really liked it. But then I'm like, what Sam is sharing a vision for, I'm like, it's going to be feedback and people saying, hey, that didn't work for me, or, you tried it this way, but I actually don't feel anything on it. And so I'm actually excited for it.
100%, dude. And like, that's the beauty of, honestly, like, so God brought me to the word Mosaic.
No.
And he mentioned this word to me years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was working at a church at the time, and I just initially thought, oh, this is going to be a name of my ministry. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a ministry, but I have no idea what we're going to do. I have no idea what it's going to look like. But I definitely have loved the idea, because a mosaic is shattered pieces that are not supposed to be put together.
Yeah.
That are put together, and they're put together in a way that it's a bigger picture than just the shard that it is.
Yeah.
And it makes something beautiful. It's this beautiful piece of art. I hate, sorry, side note, I had to Google a bunch of mosaics because I was trying to make the logo, and I'd type in mosaic, and it's like they have these mosaics that are just these single tile pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not a mosaic. Like, break it. Like, it has to be shattered. Like, the poet in me was just mad at like these perfectly formed squares. I'm like, that's not it at all.
Yeah.
And because I have it in my head, and I was trying to find, anyways. So it's finding beauty in broken pieces.
Yeah.
And there's something very poetic about that. And I, like, to your point, when I said I don't want this to be a podcast about answers.
Yeah.
Because I cannot sit here today and give you guys any answers. I just simply can't. I can give you what I'm going through, which is what I'm going to do. I can give you what I'm learning, but it's not from a teacher's point of view where I'm like, I know exactly why. It's like, oh, I'm learning this.
Yeah.
And I don't quite understand how it fits in my life yet, but it's helping my mindset, and it's helping my mental health, and it's helping me breathe.
Yeah.
And so like there's a loose to this podcast
Yeah.
that I think is very poetic, and it's going to dive into the hardships and like the rough seasons that we've gone through in life. And like I've personally dealt with like a lot of loss, and I've dealt with a lot of just disappointment in my life.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has turned in on myself, where I feel like I'm a disappointment and I feel like I'm a burden to people, and like I have my insecurities in that journey. And it's looking at that, but trying to find a different angle to see the beauty in it. And it's like, okay, yes, I went through a divorce and lost my marriage and lost my job, but through that season, the basement was birthed from that.
Yeah.
And so like there was beauty in that season, even though it was a hard season for me.
Yeah.
And it was the Lord coming to where I was and sitting in it with me. And
That's good.
And actually, like, we were talking the other day on a drive, and I brought up I grew up on VeggieTales, so I'm gonna say Rack Shack and Benny. But it's, you know their names. What are their names?
Yeah. Rad Shack, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yes. Rad Shack, Meshach, and
My
Abednego.
phone is currently indisposed. So we could give you a scripture reference, but you'll just have to trust us.
But we were talking about it, and I had for the first time the perspective that, you know, God didn't have to actually go into the furnace with them to save them from the fire.
Come on.
He was powerful enough to save them from afar,
Yep.
but had chosen to get into the furnace,
Yep.
to get in the fire with them and say, I'm not only going to save you
Yeah.
from this death, but I'm going to be with you in it.
Yeah.
And there's something about knowing a God who steps into our mess with us and being like, I'm here too.
Yeah.
And not just on a throne afar.
Yeah.
Even though you still would value, you still would worship, you still would glorify him.
Yeah.
Knowing that he's willing to step down from that throne and step into the furnace with you while you're in it
It's so good.
is just, I had never thought about that before.
Yeah.
And so these are conversations that we just naturally have had. And that's what I'm wanting this to be. With this fear, we're stepping into this, and there's so many elements of fear that I have just questions, I have curiosities about.
Yeah.
And I did a post a few days ago, and I posed the question, what is your fear keeping you from?
Yeah.
Because I don't believe, actually, I think it's biblical to say God did not give us a spirit of fear.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that is in the Bible, but I know it exists.
Yeah.
Or so I've been told. And and so, like, if he didn't give this to us, then it's trying to prevent us from something.
Yeah.
And when you take your fear and you look at it and you go, okay, what is this stopping me from doing?
Mm-hmm.
You start to see the value in that season. Because, a lot of people said, and I took pictures of it on my phone, but a lot of people said, it's stealing my joy.
Yeah.
It's stealing my life. It's stealing my future.
Yeah.
Some people said, like, it's stealing my relationships. And that's
Wow.
so on point, because I did not know this until a few months ago. Hatred is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is fear.
Yeah.
And so that wrecked me, because I realized that when I'm afraid in my relationships,
Yeah.
I am giving them the exact opposite of what I want to give them.
Yeah.
My desire is to give them love. My desire is to give them acceptance. But when I'm afraid, I'm shut off.
That's good.
And like, I'm not giving them, I'm not excreting love. I'm excreting fear,
Yeah.
and insecurities. And so, like, finding out what it prevents you from is a great way to start moving forward, to say, okay, like, I'm afraid, but I'm still going to take this step.
Yeah.
I'm still going to hit record. I'm still going to start this thing that I want to do. And even though I'm terrified,
Yeah.
it's something that I feel like I'm called to do,
Yeah.
that the Lord put this on my plate for a reason.
Yeah.
I have to believe that.
You know what's funny, that like what you're saying, when like fear was keeping you back from recording and doing everything that we're going to do. I have like this big thought in my head, so I'm going to spit it out. Like Mosaic, with all the pieces coming together, it's beautiful, but it's really made up of broken pieces. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like you could look at it as faults, things that people have done. And then it's like God brought all these things together. And then scripture is beauty from ashes. Like he is going to be the one who's going to be the finisher of the work. He's going to be the one who's going to bring everything together. And the thing about fear, because just this week you had dealt with a panic attack. I had dealt with like anxiousness and feeling like even calling my wife and being like, hey, I need some truths. And we'll talk about that later, of like things to bring me back out of that scared space, because we're dealing with some really real life stuff. Like we're human beings and we're actually coming together and trying to record something. And it's ironic that like this is the week that fear wants to hit us the hardest and punch us the hardest, because fear, being a spirit, doesn't want us to, one, experience this and be able to talk with one another and brothers build one another up, but it also doesn't want us to encourage anyone else and say, hey, there's actually a different way that you can go. And I look at like when I come against whatever it is in daily life or spiritual or whatever it is, it's like you have currency, and fear is one person that can take currency, and love can be the other thing that takes currency, and the currency is faith. And like, okay, am I going to give my currency to the kingdom of darkness and actually feed fear and not do a podcast on fear and not even start up something that God is going to breathe on? Or am I going to give it to love and say, God, how do you want to show your love through this podcast, where people, like when you listen to this, you may be like curled up in the corner or like sitting in the corner of your bathroom thinking, I can't move on another step. And you're going to hear these words and say, we've been there. We've been in those panic attacks. We've been in those moments, and we're telling you that there's actually a way out of it. And there's, obviously his name is Jesus, but there's practical things you can do. And that's what we want to walk through with you. So anyway.
No, absolutely. And that's why I wanted the first episode to be about fear.
Yeah.
Because I knew what was already starting to come up for both of us.
Yeah.
When I just said like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this podcast.
And we talked about that the other day, and I told Sam, I was like, it almost ticks me off that because I don't want to glorify, y'all have to hear our hearts on this.
Yeah.
We don't want to glorify fear.
No.
Like, this is not a podcast to be like, let's do an entire hour to talk about just fear. Yeah. We want to talk about hope and love and the things that drive out fear, because perfect love drives out fear. But we practically want to be like, okay, here's some things we do. Here's some things that we've been through. But
yeah, because for me personally, it's been like I've dealt with fear in many different dynamics, and it is kind of dismissed in the church world, where people, they throw out scriptures to you like, oh, like he doesn't give us a spirit of fear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like, yes, that's true, and I'm feeling this right now.
Yeah.
And so like, I do not want to dismiss your fear. I do not want to dismiss my fear. I want to process it. And that's what I feel like these conversations are going to be a lot of, is us just processing together.
Yeah.
And like already knowing that we were going to step into the first episode with a little bit of jitters.
Yeah.
What better way to talk about it than, or to express like what we want this podcast to be, than to talk about exactly what we're feeling as it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And just like the nervousness and the question mark on, will this be accepted? Will this be wanted, desired? I think that because of the fact that we are tackling it the way that we are, there's no way we can't say it's not valuable information. It's like, this is, if you broke it down to binary ones and zeros, this is data that we're just like sharing.
Yeah.
And it is my process through this. This is what helped me. It might not help you, but it also might.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is very, very valuable. And for me, I have an issue where I catastrophize a lot, which
big word.
it is a big. So my therapist gave me this word, and I love this word.
Do
now.
tell, catastrophize.
So you can fantasize.
Okay.
Which is where you're like thinking of something joyous, or like you're like thinking of your dream house, like you're in fantasy.
Right.
Catastrophizing is you're going to the worst case scenarios, and it's like everything that will go wrong. Like you're starting to see like, oh God, this could happen. Like if I like someone and I ask them out, they're going to tell me no. They might even like actually like express that publicly, and like then I'm embarrassed, and so that's catastrophizing. And I live there 99.9%.
It's very close to. I thought you were saying castrate. Like anyway, we're not castrating. I was like, wow, that's a
we're getting real graphic. Episode
you can
one,
fantasize or you can castrate. We're not castrating.
We're not castrating, but that is a worst case scenario.
I'm so glad that you gave a definition to
catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing.
I want you to say it one more time.
No, because I feel like I'm going to keep saying castrating. The next time I'm going to try to encourage somebody, I'm going to be like, listen, stop castrating.
Our listeners are going to need a legend. They're like, castrate. Oh, he means catastrophize.
Yeah, that's what he meant that.
Yeah. It's
sorry.
Like, no, you're fine.
All right, keep going.
So, and just to throw you off a little bit more,
I'm not
editing any of this. So all of that's going to be in there. And it's going to be great. And I'm here for it. And so anyways, I live in this like mindset where I am constantly looking at like worst case scenarios. And it's, I've heard it voiced where it's like, plan for the best, but expect the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even bother planning for the best because I just expect the worst.
Wow.
And that's where a lot of my self-talk is not positive. And I tell myself I'm unworthy.
Wow.
And that's where I sit at a default.
Yeah.
And I grew up kind of becoming a people pleaser because of that. And it was an interesting dynamic because as a kid, I caught on to the fact that good manners are rewarded, but like my motivation in my good manners was not the best. And so I'd open a door for someone and they'd be like, oh, you're so polite. And what they don't see is that I'm opening the door because I don't believe I deserve to go in front of you. I deserve to go last versus I just want to serve you and be polite. And that's the motivation is so key in your own mindset. Because when I started, and a lot of the underlying problem here was I didn't like me and I didn't love me. And so immediately, if I met you, my default was I'm less than you.
Wow.
And when you walk through your day-to-day like that, it is just horribly taxing and just dealt with a lot of depression. But like it was a lot of unknown depression. Like I didn't express it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this dynamic. We've grown up in a time where it was kind of kids are not meant to be seen or heard.
Or seen, not heard.
Yeah.
They can stand in the corner, but just don't talk.
Just don't talk.
Yeah.
And so like my dad was a minister and we traveled a lot and like we would go to their friends' houses and we'd go to dinners and stuff. And it's that moment where like you pull in as a parent and you park the car, then you turn to your kids and you're like, hey, I want you on your best behavior. And to me, that meant shut up.
Yep. I have to say, as a parent, that's I'm all too familiar with that conversation because it happened obviously when I was a kid. I'm sure it's happened for every generation since the Flintstones. But like when we pull up in the car, it's usually Ruth, my wife, turning around and being like, listen, I will slit your throats if you do anything out of order. And it's usually my youngest, AJ, who will either end up standing on the table, taking a banana and using it as a microphone and stripping his clothes off, which he tries to do at every moment. He's
That's
literally
a thing
taken
that your son does.
Yes. He's literally taken breadsticks and used them as microphones and stood up at places. So, anyway, continue.
No, yeah. And that's why I love, like, you can speak to like the parent side of that. I'm not a parent yet. So I'm just like, I know what it meant for me.
Yeah.
And it meant be quiet. And then we'd sit there for a whole evening and I wouldn't say anything. And at the end of the night, the guests that we're with, they turn to my parents. They're like, wow, your kids are so well behaved.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it's a rewarded behavior that, like, as a kid, I took and I was like, okay, this is what it means to be good.
Yeah.
And the work that I've been doing in therapy is realizing that this persona stuck with me through my adulthood. And me and my therapist have labeled him, sorry, I have like hiccups that are trying to happen. And as a child.
No editing, Sam. Just go with it.
This is it. This is in there. My hiccups will be here, whether or not. And fear. No, so my therapist and I have talked about this persona as my kid. Okay. And so, like, the kid thinks that he needs to sit on the couch, not talk, and just do everything to disappear.
Yeah.
And he thinks that that's good behavior.
Yeah.
And then there's this side of me he's a rebel. And he wants to set this couch on fire and say, like, you're not going to dismiss me. Yeah. I have something to say. Yeah. And he's more aggressive. And I had always thought of him as like polite, the devil, like the demon inside, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was the bad guy.
Yeah.
He breaks things. Like, he does not respect people. And my therapist, when we were talking about him, she was like, well, what is the good side of him? And I misunderstood the question. And I'm like, well, it's the kid. The kid's the good side.
Yeah.
And she's like, no. Like, what is his value that you find attractive? Because there's a reason he's a part of you.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never thought about that. There's nothing valuable about him. She's like, don't think about it. And I had to sit there and think a lot to get to the point where I'm like, well, I guess he's bold. Boldness is a good thing.
Yeah.
He's courageous. Like, he'll do things very, what's the word? Confident in himself. Yeah. Without fear. Like, he will absolutely set that couch on fire, even though he's sitting on it, which is a very courageous thing to do. He's creative, like unbelievably creative. And like, so he has these valued elements.
Yeah.
And then she was like, what are the bad things about the kid? And this kid that I thought was just pure good, I have to go, well, he's passive. He's self-sacrificial. He allows himself to be dismissed. He wants to disappear, and he kind of freezes. Yeah. He doesn't help. But his good sides are he's extremely caring.
Yeah.
He's extremely polite. He pays attention like nothing else. Yeah. Because when you're sitting there and you're quiet, all you can do is pay attention.
Yeah.
And you start to notice and pick up on things. So he's intuitive. And so, like, we're breaking this stuff down, and she's like, when you take the good of both and you bring them together as one person, that is who you are. And I was just floored by this concept of it's the kid and the rebel, and not either or versus each other.
Yeah. And
that has helped me in my own journey through this and trying to figure out, okay, when I'm afraid, my first instinct is to become this kid and just disappear. Yeah. And someone else lead, someone else make decisions, because I'm just going to sit here with my knees knocking. And that is my default. If I sit there too long, my rebel starts to show up. And then he becomes extremely, what's the word?
Out of control?
Not just out of control, but unpredictable. So it's kind of like he goes, yeah, like off the hinge, you know, and that's where things can go sideways if I'm not like really trying to what's the word? If I'm dysregulated.
Okay. Yeah.
If I'm like outside of my window of tolerance, which is something that I'm learning in therapy as well, then he is more in control.
Yeah.
And he's more sporadic and he's more devil may care kind of behavior. And that's where I become a hazard for myself in like the relationships around me.
Yeah.
And so that has been my journey with fear, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I said, like we don't have answers here in this space.
Still in it.
But I'm still in it. And I'm still feeling like I had, like you said earlier, like I had a panic attack this week.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like for you, but that's been my journey.
Yeah. Fear, I would say I've dealt with this all my life, and I can pinpoint in just like covering people and protecting people throughout my life that have not contributed, but kind of were those times where I really needed somebody. And I didn't get whatever it was, and so it kind of molded the way that I felt. If I had to sum everything up in a nutshell of the way that I feel, or that child that, like what you were talking about, I feel like there's like this the two kids inside of me. Mine is good, polite little Daniel, and trust everybody, and it just has like a childlike faith. And then there's this other little kid in me who is like Rambo Daniel, who has to do everything himself because he has no trust in anyone. And the problem I have is that I'm exploring as of late, and I'm still walking through this journey, is trusting Holy Spirit from day to day for my daily bread. I mean, I'm thinking of like Matthew 4 while you were talking. I'm thinking like while Jesus was being tempted, and when he came to him the first time, he was like, turn these stones into bread. And Jesus turns around and he's like, no, because you live on every word that comes out of God's mouth, and your daily bread, basically. And the thing is that if I was Jesus, man, we'd be having like Panera bread. We've been having like all kinds of bread at that point, because I'm the planner, but it goes back so much more from planning. I want to have plan A, B, C, because I don't trust God to have plan A taken care of. So I feel like I have to have B and C and D and E-1 just in case he doesn't come through for me. And it's so heavy on me because I've seen God's faithfulness in so many areas. I mean, just breathing right now, doing a podcast with you, having you in Palestine, like all of these different things, like God has been faithful, like, and then my children and our health. And I could go one by one and just name these blessings. And I'm like, I feel guilty almost sometimes because I'm like, God has been nothing but faithful to me. He has been nothing but trustworthy. But I let those fears come in and speak to me and say, well, do you know what's going to happen next month? Or, hey, what about that thing in 6 months that you're worried about? And I have to constantly remind myself that I don't have to worry about those things. And I don't have to have the answers, even though I'm saying that. And then in the back of my mind, I'm going to get those answers.
Right.
Yeah. But going back, there's different areas in my life that I had people, like I said, that let me down. I remember one specifically, and I'm not going to go into details, but it was pretty hurtful. It was like something that put shame on me too. And it was something that I've talked with my therapist about and really went way back. But it was something that I felt like this person inside of my life should have given me something and helped me because I was just a kid, and that didn't come through. And so when that happened, ever since then, I think it was a marking point in my life of, well, Daniel, somebody that you're going to depend on is not going to be there to help you. And so you've got to come up with all these things yourself. And so ever since then, whether it be job or whether it be school or something, I've always had this, and maybe some of y'all deal with this, it's always like a panic Like, if I don't get this, then this is going to happen. And then the castration comes, or whatever you call it.
Catastrophizing.
The catastrophizing. the catastrophizing. Did I get castrated?
They did that at your school?
It was horrible. So the catastrophizing thing comes, and I start thinking of the worst case scenario. And I even tell my wife, I'm like, Ruth, okay, like as of late, we got this camper. And when we're, I gotta stop laughing. When we're up in Dallas and I'm getting this camper, like, as soon as I drove away from this place where we picked it up and I bought it and stuff from like this individual, I like look at Ruth and I'm like, this thing's stolen. I bet this thing is stolen. I bet the cops are on our tail right now. And I'm
looking
like,
for it right now.
Yeah, they're literally calling in like, choppers, pros, and then I like hear a chopper and like look up real quick and think. So anyway. Like, and then we even got back to the house and I looked that up and then it turns out it wasn't stolen. Oh, thank God. I'm like, okay, we're good there. Then I was like, well, I bet this thing is going to like leak and fall apart as soon as we get it back to the house. Like, I'm thinking of every worst case scenario that's going to happen. And I want to tell everybody out there, guess what? We're going camping in a month and a half. Everything's fine on the camper. It did have a tiny little bit of leak in the roof. But, it's like I go to the worst case scenario because my brain is telling me, God's not going to take care of you. As soon as you pull up to the campground, all the tires are going to fall off and your family's going to die. Like, I got to get away from those things. And what's so, just like what we said in the beginning, I'm giving that currency into fear and I'm feeding that thing rather than partnering with Holy Spirit and being like, God, is my camper really stolen? Like, can we just enjoy life? Can we just do this thing? So,
yeah, there's this amazing TV show called This Is Us.
It is a terrible
No.
TV show. I'm trying to get as close as I can to the mic.
You really want that radio voice?
If you want to get on medication for depression, watch this show.
No, some of y'all are blessed and y'all know. It is an absolutely amazing TV show. And there's a dynamic between a husband and wife in the show where they
Are depressed.
like it's when they're going through a season and there's like a challenge. They look at each other and they're like, okay, worst case scenario. Yeah. Like go. Like voice it. And because there's something to voicing it that like takes the power away.
Wow.
And it really does help. Like I did this in my previous marriage where we were going through a hard time. And I was just like, okay, worst case scenario. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like we end up sleeping under 360 because we don't have a home anymore. And then it was like all the things that had to happen to get to that point. There were so many people in our lives that cared about us, that would give us a place to sleep, at least a couch, like, absolutely. Like, and people who would help us out and let us be in a place until we're on our feet kind of thing.
My camper.
And your camper, exactly.
It has a leak, but you're all right.
It's just a small leak.
Just a tiny,
It's a tiny leak. It's good. We can put duct tape on it. It's fine.
There you go.
And so it's like, there is a benefit to it, but when you are constantly going to it, and it's like the first thing, like you can't even enjoy this camper that you just picked up.
Yep.
And you can't think of, oh my gosh, all these amazing trips that I get to do with my kids.
The memories.
This thing's stolen. The cops are looking for us right now.
Going to prison. We can camp at prison.
It's taking your joy.
It's taking my joy. Yeah.
You almost sounded like you wanted to say something.
I had a quick thought because
Go ahead.
You were saying to voice it out. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of marinating on that one for good because all right. So this is a practical thing real quick. What Ruth and I do in our marriage is, and she does it way better than I do, but when I come up with a catastrophe and I feel like something's going to be worst case scenario, Ruth is always there as like my sounding board and is like, okay, let's work this out. Let's hear some truths. And we share this when we're doing like marriage coaching and things like that. We always say, we got to hear some truths. And so you take whatever it is, let's say, a common one is like finances, because that's a pretty big stressor. All right, so like there's this major bill and you don't know how you're going to pay this bill. So you set the bill right here and then you come over to this side, if you can almost compartmentalize it, and you say, okay, here's the truths. We are doing fantastic as far as our health, and God has really blessed us. No one right now is dying. and everything's going to be okay. And then, hey, God has given us the ability to work. We have jobs and we're going to make an income and we're going to pay this thing. And then it goes to the next one. And we start it after a while, when you start naming the things that are good, it is gratitude coming out of your heart. And the coolest thing about gratitude, I shared this with somebody a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. It's like an incense that comes out of your mouth. And so we may not be aware of it like in the angelic, but when you start to release gratitude and thankfulness out of your mouth, it's almost as if the angels are coming around you because they smell something that smells good. And it's because you're offering up gratitude and good incense for God to smell. And they actually join in with you and they're like, all right, they sing praises, and because they're always doing it anyway. And so when that happens, you start to notice that the whole room changes because the angelic around you, the spiritual realm around you changes. And that fear that you had that was so huge like 5 minutes ago is actually like, it'll be all right. We'll take care of that.
Yeah, it feels like gratitude and thankfulness is the kryptonite to fear.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, I don't think that you can be fearful and thankful at the same time.
You can't.
I think that's a dynamic that does not coexist. And so that's an interesting thing to think on, because if you start to feel the panic and you start to feel the fear, stopping to think about, well, what am I thankful for?
Oh, that's good.
Can actually be applying the brakes to going down that fear road.
You know, we Scripture says we enter his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. And I think it's interesting because as you're saying that, and like we're saying, we don't have answers, but I think this is good dialogue, because when I start to enter the gates with thanksgiving, like as I'm coming in with a thankful heart, fear can only go to a certain point. Fear can't enter the throne. Fear doesn't have the access that you have into the throne room of God. Yeah. And if I'm entering into a place, somebody said it this way, hello, Bill Johnson. It may have been him, a pastor out of Bethel, Redding. I think he was talking about Ezekiel's throne and just the depths God wants to take you in, almost like an ocean. The enemy can come with you to a certain point, but God wants to draw you in so deep that those things are just drowned out. And he's like, let's go out to a point that those things can't survive, but I'm going to be here. And I think gratitude brings you to that depth that fear can't swim out to. And then if it tries to swim out there, it's soon going to drown. You know what's interesting? Going back to the movie thing, I just had this other thought. I think the reason why I don't like This Is Us is because it's so real. Ruth and I have this fight all the time. Yeah. I would rather watch, like you came over to my house the other day, and like I'm usually watching either like The Last Ship, like some kind of military shoot 'em up something.
Or this John Adams, stupid
Adams.
History. Oh my God.
Our forefathers. Man, you know why I like that though? Come on. It's because it's already done.
Yeah.
Like it's 2024.
Right.
John Adams is dead.
Right.
The whole 1776, it was the show that showed our forefathers, the beginning of this nation, the Revolutionary War. And I was like, I eat that stuff up. And why? It's because plan A, B, and C worked and we're here.
You don't have to worry about it.
I don't have to worry about it. It's already, I love watching The Patriot, Braveheart, like all these things, these
I like those,
movies.
Yeah.
Well, they're history. And I'm like, it's because it's already done. And if you watch This Is Us, it's like, well, are they gonna make it? Like,
it's the unknown.
His bills start stressing me out. Like if they stress on that show, I'm like, well, God, I gotta have the same thing.
That's interesting because it's feeding your catastrophizing.
You love that word.
I just want to hear you say castrate again.
They sound so similar.
They do, but it's that environment is something that you gravitate to by default, so it feeds that. So I understand why you don't like This Is Us. I think there's deliverance and freedom for you, and like you'll see the beauty and the, just the gift that God gave us when He gave us that show.
No, there's no deliverance in that show.
But one of the dynamics that I do want to talk about, and this one is something that I feel when people do discuss fear, they do not talk about this as much as they should. And that is, you can have a fear of success.
Ooh.
And you can be afraid of something being successful or like you being successful. And it's like, I struggle with if this show takes off, like that's a lot of added pressure to carry this thing out. And like, there's a lot of responsibilities that come with that. And so a lot of us can self-sabotage in our own dreams because we're afraid of success.
Why would you be afraid of success? Explain that one to me.
That's the question. That's what I want us to dive into.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because I initially would be like, I'm just going to disappoint again.
Ooh.
And so why build a great thing if it's just going to fall because of me anyways? And I mean, there's some arrogance in there. There's some, like, I think I'm that powerful that I can step into and destroy what God's already got planned for my life.
Wow.
Like there's layers to this that aren't pretty.
No.
But like, I'm being honest here. Like, I'm afraid that we build something great and then for whatever reason, I can't continue in it. And then I think like it's just going to crumble, or I can't live up to the promises that I've given people, or that I can't, and okay, this is another dynamic of it. I can't bring you the joy and happiness I really want you to feel from me. And ultimately, I can't really bring you happiness.
Yeah.
This is a dynamic that's hit a lot in my relationships.
Yeah.
Is I want to make them happy, but I can't be their source of happiness. And so it's setting yourself up for failure in that level. And so I'm afraid of success for me because I'm afraid that there's a fall that comes with it. And so that's what I think fear of success is, at least personally. What would you say, like, for you? Do you and do you even think about this or struggle with this at all?
I would say no, because I would like things to succeed. I think I have a hard time getting to the point that I think they're gonna succeed, because like, for instance, like we have another show on this Mosaic that's going to be the shop, and we're going to talk about a truck that you and I recently did. And it wasn't that I was afraid that we're going to do so many trucks and like fix up so many things and it was going to be amazing. My in being successful, I guess, if that's what you would say success is in the shop, but I was more afraid of like, is this thing even going to freaking work, or did I just like waste my time? And I don't trust that God has me inside this truck renovation or anything like that. I think I'm the opposite, as far as you are such a dreamer and you're going to be successful. I'm trying to find the front door to the shop to even work on the truck. Yeah. So
no, because I think it's a stamina issue for me. It's like, can I sustain this success?
Yeah.
And I think that's like, therein lies the rub. It's not on me to sustain it. Like, I'm not the sustainer.
Right.
Like, God is.
You're not the source.
But I'm putting it on myself and not giving it to him. And that's where I can see that like my mindset is flawed and wrong currently, because it's like, this should not be on me. I think we had a conversation a few months ago where you were kind of freaking out. And I told you,
I guarantee you, we had a conversation.
Were you freaking out? Yeah. I think we've had a conversation like
at least once a month. We've had at least 12 this year. Maybe
it's
15.
every other day.
Every other day.
No.
I'm freaking out right now, man.
And I said something to you that was so opposite of what is told to a lot of men in our generation. You're not the provider of your family.
Woo!
And that was a huge moment for you.
Are we going to cry on the first episode?
I mean, we can.
I'm not. I'm purposefully not going to cry. I'm not going to do it.
Hey,
I'd better. Yeah.
People from the basement know me. I cry at the drop of a dime. And
do we have any dimes?
You just put on an episode of This Is Us and I'm in tears. But like, you're not the provider for your family. And this is a pressure that we have felt as men in our generation very strongly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people probably listening to this, when I said that, were like, that's wrong.
Yep. You just said that, and I automatically went, I don't know. So even you just saying, and I know it's, okay, number one, I know it's true. So everybody listening to this, just trust me, it is true 100%. You're not the provider. There's only one provider.
Break it down. Keep going.
I'm about to wrap this. There's only one provider. His name is, I just sounded like 1990s rap. This is why I don't watch This Is Us, because I'm sure they have rappers.
Why?
That's why.
Because you're afraid you're going to start rapping?
I will rap on that show. I don't know, but everything that goes wrong on this, I'm going to blame on This Is Us because it's just so serious. No, it's so true. There's only one provider. It's Jehovah Jireh. He is he is our provision. He is provision. It's his person. And even when you said it right there, it was like that thing in the back of my head right here just went, no, Daniel, don't listen to him because you're the provider for your house. Anyway, and I'm not saying I have an answer. I'm just saying it's so hard. And for guys out there right now and gals, I mean, you may be the one too, the breadwinner of your home. And you're like, no, I have to provide. I am the provider. If I don't go to work, if I don't do this, then my kids are going to starve. We're going to die. And there we go.
And it's so much pressure that you've put on yourself or your family has put on you.
Yeah.
And you cannot sustain that. You cannot keep that going forever.
Yeah.
There comes a point where you realize, I don't have the power to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where God says, finally, like, you can hand this to me.
See, that is so scary though. Let me give you a little bit of context.
Yep.
So growing up, and I'm not going to bash anybody or anything because it is scriptural, but I always had this in my ears growing up was a man who doesn't leave an inheritance for his family is worse than an infidel. Like it was, you have to do this because if you don't, you're going to be the worst of the worst scum. You've got to take care of your family. But then growing up and maturing and having my own relationship with God, I'm starting to see now there's way more to life than compensation. There's way more that, I mean, obviously you got to pay bills, and let's be wise, you got to pay bills, but there's way more for you to give your kids than a paycheck. This was one of the biggest determining factors for me to leave healthcare industry, which I'm sure I will definitely cry when we talk about that episode. But leaving healthcare and getting into the industry I'm in now, it was a huge jump for me. But the main determining factor was I need to be there for my family and be a husband and be a father. And that was the biggest thing for me, because when I stepped away from that, I was like, I'm going against every grain, not only my planning grain, but like being compensated how I was in healthcare. I felt like I'm doing a disservice to my family. And it was only because of God leading me out of that and opening doors that I actually stepped into what I'm in now. And it was because I always had, giving you that context, I always had that in my ear of you're scum of the earth if you don't take care of your family, and if you don't have a retirement, and you don't give them health insurance and all this other stuff. And then my wife, like, is that sounding board. She's like, I never grew up with, she doesn't sound like that.
I thought it was spot on.
She's British. No, I don't even think that was British. That sounded like Morty. What was I saying? She was that sounding board of being like, I never had insurance anyway. And I was like, you know what? You're so true. I put so much importance, and hopefully this sets somebody free. I put so much importance on so many stupid things. And just to give you a little bit of a picture, like, if we were kids, I think we put so much importance on buying the perfect gift for our kids when they would be just as happy with a refrigerator box playing with that. I mean, I had so many more memories and so many cool things that my sisters and I did growing up inside of a freaking refrigerator box. And I think in my mind, I've got to give my kids the world. I got to give my wife everything she needs and wants and loves and stuff. And it's way too much pressure to put on yourself.
And one of the things that you guys do as a family that I want to say aspire to, to bring to my kids as well is y'all put a lot of value in experiences now versus gifts. And so y'all are taking vacations more. Y'all are going on camping trips
in that
more.
Camper.
In that camper. And it's like,
If it leaks, that's a memory, man.
hey, you're making memories.
Making memories.
Remember
Duct
that
tape.
time when your bed flooded? Yeah.
Yeah. Remember when Dad
It's always when you dirt.
Yeah.
But like y'all do that, and I think it was like a few years ago that y'all were like, why buy gifts for kids when you can give them experiences?
Yeah.
And like y'all take them to water parks, and like y'all come up to Dallas and do different things. And I say come up like I still live there. I don't, but like I remember that, and I remember thinking like that's so cool. A lot of people just think like, oh, I have to give my kids their gifts.
Yeah.
And
that should set some people free. Think about that. I just talked to Ruth this year during Christmas time because I was like, I saw this on Facebook. They bought their kids 4 things, and I still haven't looked at the 4, and Ruth is laughing because she knows that I've said this to her 5 times and I can't remember the 4th thing, but it was you get them a book so they can read, you get them clothes, like a couple of pair of clothes so they can wear, you get them one toy that they can play with something, and then there's a 4th thing, I can't remember what that is, but it's like as Americans, we got into like this consumerism mentality, and you're not successful unless you give your kids 15 presents. And I just want to debunk that. And like what Ruth and I started doing, like what you're talking about, this journey, we started doing like Oklahoma. It doesn't have to be expensive. We went to this cabin, and then we started bringing our camper up to Oklahoma. There's a river there. Kids will sit there all stinking day in a stinking river for like 15 hours and play. And the memories they have, like the notes we took in a bottle and hid out there and stuff, like they're going to grow up in adulthood thinking I had some of the best Christmases. They're not going to remember that Turbo Man. Think of
I love that you went to Turbo Man.
Because I remember my Turbo Man. So that's a lie. If you have a chance to buy your kids a Turbo Man, get a Turbo Man first at all costs. Work however many overtime hours, and then you take them to Oklahoma.
My friend Sinbad can help you get it.
Yeah, maybe Arnold can.
Yeah,
I was gonna try an Arnold impression there, and I thought
I so badly wanted it
because I was gonna sound terrible. I was gonna call it like this, but I was like, that doesn't sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger at all. Arnold, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry that I made you sound like an idiot.
That just reminded me of Seth Price's impersonation of Arnold.
Yeah,
that was very similar and just awful. But I loved it so much.
Oh my gosh!
So there's beauty in doing a flawed impersonation.
If anything, just to make fun of somebody for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but like you said, it's the, and I think it's in the same line as it's not the gift, it's the thought that counts. Like. It's the experience, I think. Like, you can give your kids these experiences and they don't have to cost a lot of money. Yeah. But we're so afraid of being a disappointment for them that we think that we have to give them bigger, better.
Yeah.
And
the best you can give them is to learn their love language. If you haven't read about Love Languages by Gary Chapman, I would highly encourage you. One, if you're married, get the book because you need to find out what your spouse's love language is. If you have children have love languages too. And as they grow older, sometimes those things change of how you experience love. But I can tell you right now, with all 3 of my kids, my wife scored even numbers all the way across. So it doesn't matter.
Screwed.
I'm screwed either way. If I buy her a bear, like literally on Valentine's Day, I told Sam Rabbit Trail, I was like, man, we got to stop and get some flowers. And then she was, I like got home, she's like, oh, thanks for the flowers. And so she wasn't very excited about it. She's over here in the room right now shaking her head, but she knows. She would rather have like chocolates and stuff. Then I get her chocolate. And she's like, I like a necklace. Or something. And then why don't you just spend time with me? That's all I wanted. But I spend time with her anyway. It's just a terrible cycle. But Micaiah, what I was getting to was this. Micaiah is gifts. Literally when we were young parents and Kaya was just like 1 or 2 or something, she at a restaurant took a fork or a knife or some cutlery and wrapped it up in a napkin and passed it across the table. And that's the gift she wanted to give her mom, is tell her how much she loved her by just giving her a fork in that. Like, ever since then, she loves it when I just get her a card, or even when she gives me like a little bracelet thing. I have this thing on my wallet. So like all that stuff, she's the gifts person that I need to carefully plan at Christmas time and be like, all right, I need to intentionally see what she's been looking for, what she wants. Okay. So, and then in Gary Chapman's book, he talks about quality time as one. William is my quality time guy. Like, he wants to spend time with dad and mom and his siblings. The worst thing is to ground him and make him go to his room. I mean, you could beat the fire out of him. Not that we condone that. But you could do anything and send him to his room, and it's like sending him to hell. Like, it is the worst. But this Christmas, I got him a little toolkit thing that you actually worked with us on the fort outside, because I was like, I'm going to take him outside and we're going to build a fort. That's the best thing in the world. And then AJ, of course, is, what would you say? Quality time as well? Acts of service and dancing. He's the one I told you that literally got up in a restaurant and started singing. But he's the one that you could get him anything and whatever, nothing really matters. But if you like do something for him, then it means the world to him. So I don't know how we got off on that, except learn your kids' love languages and learn your spouse's love languages.
That's the joy of this podcast, dude. We can go anywhere. We can talk about anything. It all comes up, but we stay on the threads. And I feel like we've done that this episode. We've talked about fear a lot, and we've talked about our journeys through it. We are over an hour.
Wow.
Which I want to take this time because Daniel did not think he could do an hour. When I told him that these episodes were going to be an hour long, he was like, I can't do 20 minutes.
I literally feel like the shallowest shallow. And he was like, no, we're going to go with it. And then last thing, he's like, before the episode, I was like, hey, can I have like a clock or something over here to see what time we're doing? He was like, no, I don't think we're going to. I was like, okay, yeah.
I could see a clock, but you cannot.
I cannot see the clock.
And it's purpose that way. But I just want to say, I feel so proud of you for being able to do this episode and get to where you are now. I do want to ask you, how do you feel versus when we first started, and how you feel now?
I feel when we first started, I was like, how is this thing going to go? A million different ways. And just to encourage y'all that are listening, fear was knocking all the way up until Ruth slapped her hands and said record. I don't know why she did that. All right, so serious, Daniel, bring it back in. Fear was speaking to the very moment that we said, okay, we're going to hit record. And after that, and even like right now after the episode, I feel like there's so much grace on this just because God is pleased with where this is going to go and who's going to hear this and who's going to feel really set free from the things we're saying. We're not saying we have the answers, but what we're saying is that you can do it. Yep. Take a deep breath, walk through it. God has you. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
So guys, thank you for giving us a little bit of your time and watching this episode. So that's what it's going to be like. We can hit record now and actually start.
All right. I'm ready.
Okay.
You're such an idiot. Oh my gosh.
I just wanted to freak Daniel out.
I just want to throw up right then. This is what a This Is Us episode is like. That right there.
No, guys, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight, and whatever time you guys decide to listen to this, it's really up to you. We're just going to end it because I don't know what else to say. See you guys.
Bye.